the Institute for Energy Security, IES, has described the reduction in special petroleum tax as woefully insignificant. Now, this is the tax reduction that Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the National Petroleum Authority, NPA, Hassan Tampuli, describes as being responsible for the current state of prices of petroleum products. He says that petroleum prices would have been 3% higher if government had not reduced these taxes. The finance minister announced the reduction in the special petroleum tax in the 2017 budget statement. Some other excise was removed from the price of petroleum as well. Now, the price of petrol has gone up in spite of these reductions from 3.77 Ghana cedis in July to 4.29 Ghana cedis in September. Before then, the prices had been dropping steadily since March. Now, Hassan Tampuli is positive prices will soon drop again.
Cumulative effects of the reduction in the special petroleum tax from 17.5% to 15% and the complete abolition of the excise duty is that we would have been selling currently at 3% more, but for the reduction in those taxes and the abolition of the excise duty, we would have been selling at 3% more. So by and large, government's intervention has already softened and cushioned the situation. Now we are saying that irrespective of the fact that we have some current setbacks, especially with the impact of the global dynamics, which have impacted in the petroleum prices. For the past couple of days, we've seen some amount of easing down of the prices, and we are hoping by the next two pricing windows, we would have been in a very tidy situation. So there is some amount of panic, but I think to a very large extent, it is not something that we should be worried about.
And that was CEO of the National Petroleum Authority, Hassan Tampuli. Now, we have with us on Skype the Principal Research Officer of the Institute of Energy Security, IES, Gilbert Richmond Roxon. Good morning, sir, and welcome. Now, Mr. Roxon, yeah, if you can hear me, are you convinced by what the NPA boss has been saying since yesterday, that it is because of this reduction in special petroleum tax that fuel prices are not higher by some 3%?
Good morning to your viewers. I think that the government, even before it came the reins of administration, promised that it was going to review tariffs by reducing some taxes on petroleum as well as power. Unfortunately, what happened was that the government only looked at the special petroleum tax by reducing it from 17.5% to 15%. That's a 2.5 reduction. And the government also abolished the excise duty. I must state emphatically that the excise duty was just 2 pesos on gasoline and 1.8 pesos on gas oil, which is woefully inadequate when you compile or when you compute in effect what the government did. It especially means that the effects that we wanted to see, the drastic reduction that consumers wanted to see, don't materialize, and that is exactly how come we've been where we are today. The challenge is that for deregulation, we know that we have the international factors as well as the domestic factors. The domestic factors, you look at your CD depreciation or your CD's ability to compete with the dollar, whether it's strong or weak. For the international factors, you look at the crude oil price, and you also look at the benchmark for, normally the benchmark that we use is S&P Plus. And you realize for those two international factors, you don't really have control over it. But for your CD, you have control over it. And for the levies and taxes on the build-up, we also have control over it. So we are challenging government that it should rather pay attention to stabilizing the CD, having a stronger currency. Because if you remember, early in the year, fuel prices went up at the time. The exchange rate went up to about 4.7 to a dollar. When it came back to about 3.9, that's when we saw the marginal reduction that we saw in prices from 4.1 to about 3.7.
Right, Mr. Roxon, the line there is becoming very difficult to hear you. Can you restate the point you were making?
Well, at what point?
Yes. The point you were making that you would challenge government to rather look at the stability of the currency because it's the state of the currency during the year that has caused fluctuations in the fuel price that we can control.
As I mentioned, we don't have any control over it. But for the cedi, once the cedi is stabilized and once the cedi is stronger as compared to the dollar, prices are going to come down. That's exactly what we experienced early in the year, as we had the cedi dropping to 3.9 from 4.7. It had a major impact on prices at the pump as well. So we employ government to be able to look at that aspect, look at how we can bring the cedi down, because as we speak, the cedi is averaging around 4.48, which doesn't look good for consumers.
So does that mean that you're generally satisfied with the tax regime at the moment when it comes to the petroleum price build-up?
Not at all. We are not satisfied. We have said over and over again, the importance that I put out clearly, that in this fight of government reducing the taxes, we were doing this with the current Minister of Energy, who fortunately is in charge of petroleum. Yesterday I heard him on a number of stations trying to justify the tax regime and explaining that each component has the role it plays. In a position that was in the message, and we expect that in the position, the message that was carried, the same message and the same principles will guide us whilst we are in government. We expect government to look at the special petroleum tax. We don't agree with the reduction from 17.5 to 15%. We think the government should be able to abolish it. It is important to state that the current figures of an average of 4.41, if government is supposed to abolish the 15% levy or tax, special petroleum tax alone, we're going to see a reduction of 0.66 pesos. That will mean that by abolishing that alone, fuel prices per litre will come down to 3.7. That is how significant it is. So if you're going to reduce fuel prices from 4.41 to 3.7 by abolishing one tax, one special petroleum tax, you can imagine the effects they're going to see if we look at the other components. We think that the road fund is too much, 40 pesos is too much. Increase from about 7 pesos to 40 pesos. That was over 400%. The government should be able to review it downwards. If it's 20 pesos, we think it will be okay. We think that the price stabilization and recovery levy, we think that it's also not important, especially with the current deregulation that we are practicing. The government will make the argument that we should be looking at premix because we still pay for an recovery for premix. But I don't think that it's fair that when a major product, that's petroleum product for gasoline and gas oil, challenge about it, but we consistently use the money for premix. So we, in our opinion, we don't think that the government should still maintain that. There are other taxes and levies that we think it shouldn't be there. The toll levy is still part of the energy debt recovery. We are still paying toll levy of 8 pesos on every litre we buy after paying this levy for over 10 years. We think it's about time government accounts for how much it has accrued, how much it has paid, so we look at abolishing this tax, because we can't use these taxes and levies as an avenue for government raising revenue. In 2016 alone, government made almost 3.4 billion Ghana cedis on ESLA alone, and we don't think that the number of taxes in this country has given government such revenue. So government.
But when you see, Mr. Roxon, when government says that every component within this has a use, I mean, we know what has been said before when they were not in government, but now there's a country to run, and you did mention that. And we do know that the finance minister found it difficult to meet the target in terms of revenue targets when he went to parliament for the mid-year review. So clearly there are cash flow constraints within the system. We have so many commitments to meet as a nation. Can we really afford to remove some of these taxes?
We admit that we agree that government has a lot of obligations and responsibilities, whether health sector, whether energy, whether education. Government needs resources, has a lot of responsibilities. But we don't agree that the petroleum sector is the only avenue for government to be imposing taxes. If government needs revenue, I think that the major thing that government should be doing is to be looking at the informal sector. There's a lot of revenue from the informal sector, but we haven't been able to structure the informal sector properly to be able to get the taxes that we need. For the formal sector, we keep taxing the formal sector, and we keep introducing indirect sector in sectors that we think people consume a lot when it comes to communication, when it comes to petroleum. We don't think that that's the avenue for government to use. Yes, we admit, we agree, governments need money, but governments should look elsewhere instead of petroleum price.
Finally, Mr. Roxon, a lot of questions are being raised with government when it comes to petroleum pricing, but are you satisfied with the way the private companies are handling this issue of deregulation?
Yes, when it comes to deregulation, we know that even though it's deregulation, we still have the National Petroleum Authority playing a role of, let me put it that way, monitoring these OMCs so they don't excessively make profit. So as much as it's fully deregulated, we still have some form of regulation from the MPA to make sure that they don't go outside the box. When the range or the margins are given, they have the option to choose what they're supposed to do. So we think that fairly the OMCs are doing well. The MPA needs to monitor them on the field, because we know that there are certain challenges where some of them some of them don't sell the required quantity to the consumers. But by and large, we are happy with the pricing mechanisms that we are using. Let me be quick to add that we've been encouraging consumers that when it comes to pricing, not all OMCs sell at the price. Okay, so an OMC is doing 4.41. We have another OMC that is doing 4. Another one. So we should pay attention to them, also we'll get value for money. That's the motive behind the regulation, and competition drives prices down. Definitely, once prices are low, you get value for money other than buying from an OMC that sells at the highest price on the market.
Right, thank you very much, Gov't Richmond Roxon. He is the Principal Research Officer for the Institute of Energy Security, IES.